The dense fog hung over the village of Eldoria like an eternal shroud, enmeshing the stone cottages and crooked roofs in a damp, cold embrace. Autumn had arrived early that year, bringing winds that howled like lost souls through the narrow, deserted streets. Olivia walked slowly, one hand resting on her rounded belly, feeling the weight not only of the child she carried, but of all the misery life had imposed on her. At 19, she was a shadow of her former self, disheveled brown hair pulled back in a loose bun, green eyes sunken with exhaustion, and a thinness that betrayed weeks of hunger. The pregnancy, the fruit of a fleeting and forbidden love with a traveller who had left without looking back, had condemned her to the scornful glances of the village. Her family, poor and proud, had cast her out of their home, murmuring about dishonor and curses. Now, alone, she begged for what she could to survive. The bell of the old church tolled in the distance, a hoarse chime echoing through the mist, marking noon. Olivia stopped in front of the town tavern, where the smell of fresh bread and meat stew tortured her like a blade. Her stomach rumbled, a cruel reminder that the baby needed more than empty promises. She had tried everything, washing clothes for the laundresses, gathering herbs in the fields, but winter was approaching, and work was scarce. It was then that the rumor reached her ears, whispered by the women at the well. The old graveyard on the outskirts of the dark forest needed a caretaker. The owner, a mysterious man no one had seen for years, offered food and a handful of coins to anyone who dared to clean the moss-covered tombs and dead leaves. "That place is cursed," they warned. "Wolves roam at night and shadows move on their own." But Olivia had no choice. Hunger was a worse curse than any ghost. With a rusty bucket and an improvised broom of branches, she followed the dirt path that led to the graveyard. The surrounding forest whispered secrets, twisted branches like skeletal fingers reaching out to touch her. The air grew colder as she advanced, and the damp ground clung to her worn boots. Finally, the black iron gate appeared, rusty and ajar, as if inviting the living into the realm of the dead. Olivia pushed it with her shoulder, the creak echoing like a groan. Inside, the graveyard stretched across a gentle hill, dotted with tilted headstones and decaying mausoleums. The oldest tombs, covered in thorny ivy, seemed to whisper stories of a forgotten era. Nobles fallen in ancient wars, treaties broken with creatures of the night. In the center stood a larger mausoleum of grey stone, carved with leaping wolves, their empty eyes fixed on the misty horizon. She began her work slowly, kneeling to pull the weeds that suffocated the smaller graves. The smell of wet earth and decomposition invaded her, but Olivia swallowed her nausea. Thinking of the bread she would earn at the end of the day, her mind wandered as she swept the dry leaves, memories of warm nights with her lost lover, the touch of his strong hands contrasting with the current cold. "Why did you abandon me?" she murmured to herself, a solitary tear tracing a path down her dirty face. The baby gave a gentle kick, as if responding, and she caressed her belly. "We'll survive, my love, just a little longer." But the weight of loneliness crushed her. In the village, they called her a lost woman, a woman of no worth, stained by her illegitimate pregnancy. Her father, with heavy fists, had beaten her for the last time, yelling that she was a disgrace to their family line. Now, there, among the dead, she felt invisible, unworthy even of the ghost's compassion. The sun filtered through the mist in pale rays, but the graveyard remained gloomy, as if an eternal shadow protected it. Olivia moved to a row of more isolated tombs near the edge of the forest. There, the headstones were different, inscribed with ancient runes she didn't understand, symbols of claws and full moons. One of them, larger than the others, bore a name faded by time, something like Draven, but the moss devoured it. As she cleaned, a shiver ran up her spine. She looked up, feeling a weight in the air, as if she were being watched. The mist danced among the trees, and for an instant she swore she saw a movement, a tall, motionless silhouette, half hidden by the shadows of the pine trees. Her heart pounded. It must be the wind, she thought, but a primal instinct screamed otherwise. Wolves, hunters, or something worse? Like the tales grandmothers told about tomb guardians, immortal beings cursed to wander for eternity, she continued sweeping with more urgency, sweat mixing with the cold dew on her skin. The baby stirred again, as if sensing its mother's tension. Olivia stopped to rest, leaning against a headstone. Her thoughts revolved around a deep longing for belonging. Someone who would see her not as a burden, but as worthy of protection, someone strong enough to challenge the cruel world around her. A distant howl echoed through the forest, low and guttural, sending birds soaring in panic. Olivia froze, the bucket falling from her hands. The silhouette. It moved again, closer now, its golden, wild eyes fixed on her through the haze. It wasn't human. It was something ancient, powerful, the master of the tombs, awakened from his eternal slumber by the presence of a vulnerable soul in his forbidden domain. Terror immobilized her, but beneath the fear, a strange spark ignited in her chest. Curiosity, perhaps, or the beginning of a bond she didn't even comprehend. Pregnancy made her fragile, but also stubborn. She rose, wiping her hands on her ragged skirt, and continued her work, ignoring the gaze that burned her. Little did she know that at that moment, her destiny intertwined with that of an ancient alpha, an immortal wolf whose curse of solitude mirrored her own. The fog thickened, and the graveyard seemed to hold its breath, waiting for what would come next. The mist grew denser, like a living veil, weaving through the twisted branches of the forest and whispering dark promises into Olivia's ear. She gripped the broom handle with trembling fingers, her heart hammering against her ribs like a fleeing prisoner. Those golden eyes, penetrating like embers in an ancient forge, pierced her from afar, motionless and hungry. It was no illusion. The air carried a new scent, earthy and wild, like wet fur after a storm. The howl echoed again, closer now, vibrating in her chest and rousing the baby, who stirred restlessly in her belly. "Who's there?" she called out, her voice hoarse with fear and exhaustion, echoing against the cold headstones. No answer came, only the rustling of leaves like the muffled laughter of spectres. Olivia swallowed hard, cold sweat trickling down her back despite the frigid air. She thought of fleeing, of abandoning the bucket and the promised coins, but hunger was a stronger chain than dread. "I need this," she murmured to herself, forcing her feet to move back to work. She pulled more ivy from a smaller tomb, the thorns cutting her palms, but the blood that welled up seemed to attract something. A low growl, almost inaudible, emerged from the shadows. Suddenly, the gate creaked behind her, a metallic sound that cut the silence like a blade. Olivia spun on her heels, the broom raised like a pathetic weapon. There, emerging from the mist like a living statue, stood he, tall, imposing, with broad shoulders draped in a black cloak tattered by time. His dark hair fell in wild waves to his shoulders, and those golden eyes fixed on her with an intensity that made her take a step back. His skin was pale, marked by ancient scars that snaked like dry rivers across his neck and hands. He was no ordinary man. There was something primal about him, an aura of a predator that made the air tremble. Wolves, she thought, recalling the village legends, the cursed guardians, alphas of ancient blood, bound to territories desecrated by forgotten treaties. "You shouldn't be here," he said, his voice deep and raspy, like the distant rumble of an avalanche. Each word carried a weight, echoing in her mind like an instinctive command. He approached slowly, his steps silent on the moss, stopping a few feet away. Olivia noticed the subtle fangs in his jaw, the feral gleam in his eyes under the faint light of the setting sun. This place is not for the living, especially not for the fragile like you." She raised her chin despite the trembling in her legs. Pregnancy made her vulnerable, but pride, that last ember of fire that not even misery had extinguished, kept her standing. "I came to work. I heard the master of the tombs needs help. Food and coins in exchange for cleaning. If it's not you, who is it?" Her green eyes met his, and for an instant something passed between them. A silent recognition, as if he saw beyond the dirt and exhaustion into the wounded soul she hid. He tilted his head, his lips curving into a dark, almost predatory smile. "I am Draven, guardian of this domain for centuries. The tombs are mine, and I protect them from intruders and fools who bargain with the unknown." His eyes briefly dropped to her belly, and a shadow crossed his face. "Surprise, compassion, you carry new life. Why risk that in a place like this? The village rumors don't lie. Wolves roam, and they are no ordinary wolves." Olivia felt a blush rise to her cheeks, a mix of shame and defiance. "Because I have no choice. My family cast me out like trash. The village looks at me as if I were a plague. This baby, he's all I have left. Hunger doesn't wait for legends." The words came out sharper than she intended, laden with the trauma that corroded her. The nights of crying alone, her father's fists marking her skin, the whispers of unworthy that echoed in her mind. She touched her belly instinctively, feeling the faint kick as a reminder of her fragile strength. Draven remained silent for a moment, his golden eyes softening imperceptibly. He moved closer, extending a calloused hand to touch the headstone beside her. The same one with the faded name, now clean enough to reveal Draven of Eldor, engraved in runes that seemed to pulse faintly. "You cleaned my own tomb," he murmured, his voice low, almost reverent. "Few dare to approach. There is a curse here, woven in blood and moonlight. I was cursed by a broken treaty, bound to this earth like a chained wolf, immortal but solitary. I watch the living to keep them away. But you smell of pure despair, like my own." The air between them crackled with tension, a subtle warmth emanating from him that contrasted with the graveyard's cold. Olivia felt an inexplicable pull, as if the blood in her veins responded to his. An ancient, symbolic connection, as the legend spoke of bonds between humans and alphas, sealed by blood and destiny. "Then send me away," she retorted, but her voice faltered, betrayed by the curiosity that bloomed in her chest. He was monstrous, yes, but in his eyes she saw loneliness, an echo of her own rejection. For the first time in months, someone saw her not as a burden, but as someone worthy of notice. Draven hesitated, his hand hovering near her arm, without touching. "I cannot, not now that you have awakened something dormant." A howling wind swept through the graveyard, carrying dead leaves in a whirlwind around them from the forest. Red eyes gleamed in the growing darkness. Loyal werewolf sentinels growled softly. "But stay until nightfall. I will give you what I promised, and perhaps more. Prove your worth, human, and who knows, the shadows might offer shelter where the world has failed." Olivia took it in slowly, her heart torn between fear and a spark of forbidden hope. As he turned and moved into the depths of the central mausoleum, its iron doors opening with a supernatural creak, she resumed her work, her hands trembling, sweeping the damp ground. The fog closed in around her, but now it carried a scent of possibility, of fierce protection, of a love born in the tombs amidst curses and hidden desires. The baby calmed, as if sensing the change, and Olivia allowed herself to dream for an instant of an alpha who could heal her wounds with claws and gold. But twilight was falling, and with it the shadows lengthened, promising revelations that would test her courage and her heart. Twilight crept in like a silent thief, painting the graveyard in shades of purple and grey, while the fog curled tighter around the headstones. Olivia swept the damp leaves with mechanical movements, her body aching with fatigue, but her mind teeming with Draven's words. He was real, not a legend whispered by village bonfires, but flesh and blood, with eyes that seemed to devour secrets. The air now carried his scent, mingled with earth and moss, an aroma that unsettled and attracted her simultaneously. Her thoughts revolved around the curse he had mentioned, a broken treaty, blood and moon. She didn't understand, but she felt its weight in the air, like an invisible chain that bound not only him, but perhaps all who dared to approach. The baby kicked again, an insistent reminder of her fragility. Olivia stopped to lean against a low tomb, her hand pressing her rounded belly. "Calm down, little one," she whispered, her voice low so as not to disturb the shadows. Hot tears welled in her eyes, not from fear, but from a deepening loneliness. In the village, she was invisible, a stain on the natural order, daughter of a rough blacksmith who saw her as weakness, mother of a bastard child who carried the stigma of a fleeting love. Her father had once dragged her by her hair, screaming that she shamed the family name, that her swollen body was proof of her impurity. "You're not even worth the bread you eat," his words echoed in her sleepless nights. Here among the dead, at least the ghosts didn't judge, but Draven, he had seen her, and in his gaze there was something beyond pity, a hunger that made her blush. A low growl broke from the forest, cutting the silence like claws on wood. Olivia straightened, her heart pounding. The sentinels Draven had mentioned, red eyes flickered among the trees, more than one pair now, circulating the perimeter of the graveyard like predators stalking prey. She recoiled, the broom falling to the ground with a dull thud. "Stay back," she murmured, but her voice trembled. The mist stirred, revealing shadowy forms, wolves with dark fur, larger than normal, with bared fangs and eyes that glowed like hot coals. They were not common animals. There was intelligence in them, a malice that reminded her of tales of rival alphas, cursed clans, battling over ancient territories for forgotten treaties. One of the wolves advanced, leaping over a headstone with lethal grace, its muzzle raised to catch her scent and the baby's. Terror paralyzed her for an instant. Memories of past abuses resurfaced, the feeling of being cornered, helpless against greater forces. But then a powerful howl echoed from the central mausoleum, deep and dominant, making the ground vibrate. The iron doors burst open with a crash, and Draven emerged like a storm incarnate. His black cloak billowed in the wind, revealing his muscular body marked by scars that looked like living runes. His golden eyes blazed, and in a blink he transformed, not completely, but enough for fangs to lengthen and claws to sprout from his hands. "Go back to the shadows!" he roared, his voice a thunder that echoed through the trees. The rival wolves hesitated, growling in defiance, but recoiled before his presence. Draven moved with supernatural speed, positioning himself between Olivia and the beasts. One of the attackers dared to lunge, leaping toward her, but Draven intercepted it in mid-air, his claws tearing into the creature's flank in a blur of blood and fur. The wolf howled in pain, falling to the moss with a whimper, while the others dispersed into the forest, vanishing into the darkness like defeated ghosts. Panting, Draven turned to her, his chest heaving, drops of enemy blood dripping from his hands. His golden eyes swept over her, assessing damage. "Are you hurt?" he asked, approaching with cautious steps, as if fearing to break her. The scent of blood and fury enveloped him, but beneath it was a reluctant tenderness that disarmed her. Olivia shook her head, her legs giving out. She leaned against a headstone, her body trembling, not only from fear, but from a wave of relief that made her weep. They were going to get me. Why? What do they want?" Her voice was a broken whisper, her hands protective over her belly. The baby stirred restlessly, sensing the chaos. Draven wiped his claws on his cloak, the primal gesture contrasting with the softness in his expression. He crouched down to her level, maintaining a respectful distance, yet close enough for the warmth of his body to envelop her like a shield. They are renegades, alphas of an ancient clan who broke the blood treaty centuries ago. They scent weakness, and new life like yours attracts those hungry for power. This graveyard is my domain, sealed by a bargain with the moon. I protect the tombs in exchange for solitary immortality, but your presence has awakened them like a call to challenge the guardian. She gazed at him, her teary green eyes meeting his. For the first time, she saw the legendary ferocity, the lines of pain on his face, the weight of centuries of isolation. You could have let me go. Why protect me? I'm just a stranger, a burden. A low, bitter laugh escaped him. Because I see in you what I once was, rejected, cursed for being born different. My clan banished me for a forbidden love with a human, sealing me here with a blood curse. I wandered alone, fearing my own monstrosity, until the treaty bound me. Your pain, it echoes my own, and the baby. He extended his hand hesitantly, hovering over her belly without touching. He carries a potential you can't even imagine, pure blood, perhaps linked to the ancient ones. The touch almost grazed her skin through the thin dress, sending an electric shiver through her body, not of fear, but of a forbidden sensual tension that made her hold her breath. Their bodies were too close in the cold air, his warmth contrasting with the night's chill. Olivia felt a pull in her chest, as if invisible threads bound them, symbolizing bonds of blood and destiny. I'm scared, she confessed, her voice trembling, of being unworthy, of failing him. My father beat me for being weak. The village spits on me for carrying this. And you're a monster from the stories. Draven retracted his hand, but his eyes softened, golden like the setting sun. Monsters are made by the world, Olivia. I can show you there is strength in vulnerability. Stay tonight in the mausoleum. My loyal sentinels obey me. You will be safe. Tomorrow I will give you food, coins, and answers. She hesitated, her heart torn between the instinct to flee and the desire for belonging. The fog thickened, carrying distant howls, but there with him, the graveyard seemed less a prison and more a refuge. Olivia assented, allowing him to guide her into the mausoleum, the doors closing behind them with a final clang. Inside, eternal torches lit themselves, revealing rooms of carved stone with wolves and runes, a hidden world of secrets and promises. As she sat on a cold marble bench, feeling weariness overcoming her, she wondered if that fierce protection could heal the scars on her soul, or if the growing bond would drag them into a shared curse. The night deepened, and with it the whispers of the moon promised transformations that would test not only her courage, but the fire of a nascent love in the shadows. The eternal torches flickered on the mausoleum's stone walls, casting dancing shadows that looked like living claws crawling across the uneven floor. The air inside was warmer than Olivia expected, laden with an ancient aroma, dry incense, damp earth, and something metallic like coagulated blood. She settled onto the marble bench, her hands still trembling over her belly, feeling the baby gradually calm, as if the rhythmic pulse of the flames reassured him. The place was an underground labyrinth, spiral staircases descending to hidden chambers, decorated with carvings of howling wolves and runes that glowed faintly under the orange light. It wasn't a cold tomb. It was a forgotten palace, a reflection of its guardian's tormented soul. Draven moved with feline grace, disappearing through a side arch and returning moments later with an improvised tray. Fresh bread, creamy cheese, and a steaming mug of something that smelled of herbs and honey. He placed it beside her carefully, as if fearing his touch might break her. "Eat," he murmured, his deep voice echoing in the walls. "You need strength, the baby too." His golden eyes watched her as she took the bread, devouring it with a hunger that shamed her. Each bite was a balm, but also a reminder of her dependence, first on the cruel village, now on him, the monster of the shadows. Olivia wiped the crumbs from her lips, her stomach settling for the first time in days. "Thank you," she said softly, looking up at him. He had sat on the floor in front of her, legs crossed, his black cloak falling like raven wings around his body. The scars on his neck seemed to pulse faintly, like living veins beneath his pale skin. "Why are you doing this? You said you protect the tombs from intruders." "I am an intruder." Draven tilted his head, his dark hair falling across his face, momentarily concealing the feral gleam in his eyes. "Because destiny brought you here, Olivia. I smelled you even before you stepped through the gate, despair mingled with pure life. It's rare in centuries of solitude." He extended his hand hesitantly, and this time lightly touched the air above her belly, without physical contact, but the gesture sent a shiver down her spine. "The treaty that bound me was between humans and ancient alphas. We, the Guardians, swore to protect the sacred lands in exchange for immortality, but a rival alpha, thirsty for power, broke the pact with traitorous blood. I was the price, sealed here, immortal, but chained, guarding the dead while living like one." She felt a tightness in her chest, his words echoing her own wounds. "My father told me I was the price of his dishonor, that my pregnancy was a curse, proof that I was weak, unworthy." Tears came without warning, hot against the cold marble. "He beat me until I bled, screaming that I would never belong anywhere. The village shuns me as if I carried the plague. And now here with you, I feel the same fear of being a burden, of attracting more pain." Draven rose slowly, approaching until the warmth of his body enveloped her like a blanket. He knelt before her, his golden eyes fixed on her green ones, full of a vulnerability that contrasted with his primal strength. "You are not a curse, Olivia. Your blood, it calls to mine." With a fluid movement, he rolled up the sleeve of his cloak, revealing a forearm marked by a crescent moon-shaped scar, pulsing with a subtle light. "See, this is the seal of the treaty. But when you cleaned my tomb, something awakened, an ancient blood bond, like those that link destined souls. Your child. He may carry the echo of a human lineage that once allied with the Alphas. You didn't come here by accident." The air between them crackled with tension. Olivia instinctively reached out, touching his scar. His skin was warm, almost feverish, and at the contact, a fleeting vision invaded her. Flashes of a Gothic court under full moons, balls where humans and wolves danced in treaties of peace, a forbidden love sealed with a cut on the wrist, blood mixing in a silver chalice. She recoiled, gasping, her heart pounding. "What was that? I saw you, with a woman like me centuries ago." He nodded, his lips curving into a melancholy smile. "My human mate. She carried our child, like you. The clan killed her out of fear of the bond, cursing me to wander alone. But you awakened memories I buried." His fingers brushed hers, a light touch that sent sparks across her skin, awakening a forbidden desire in her womb, not just for the baby, but for something deeper, sensual, as if their bodies yearned for a union that would heal ancient wounds. Before she could respond, a tremor shook the mausoleum. Dust fell from the ceiling, and distant howls echoed from the forest, fiercer than before. Draven stood in an instant, his fangs lengthening, his eyes blazing. "They're coming back. The renegades sense the bond forming. They want your child's blood to break my curse and claim this domain." Olivia rose, dread mingling with determination. "I won't run, not again." But fear gnawed at her. What if she was too weak? What if her presence condemned the baby? Draven pulled her to him, his strong arm around her waist, protective, but the touch ignited a spark of heat that made her blush. "You are not alone now," he whispered against her ear, his warm breath sending shivers through her body. "I will protect you, but to seal this, we need a pact, a voluntary blood ritual that unites our essences against the shadows." The mausoleum doors creaked, and shadows seeped through the crack, red eyes gleaming in the darkness. Rival wolves circled, growling challenges. Draven guided her to an inner chamber where a stone altar awaited, covered in runes that pulsed like living hearts. He picked up an ancient dagger, its blade curved like a claw. "Trust me, Olivia, one cut on the wrist. Our blood mingled. It's not pain, it's rebirth." She hesitated, trauma screaming in her mind, memories of fists and rejection. But his gaze, full of an acceptance she had never known, anchored her. With a trembling nod, she extended her arm. The blade cut her skin, a brief sting, and blood welled up dark and alive. Draven did the same, mixing the drops on the altar. A silver light erupted, enveloping them in a cocoon of energy, and Olivia felt the bond form. Not just protection, but a growing desire, a love born from the ashes of the curse. The howls drew closer, claws scraping at the doors. Draven transformed partially, his body expanding with muscles and subtle fur, ready for battle. "Stay behind me," he ordered, but in his voice was pride. She had chosen, overcoming fear. As the doors gave way, revealing the rival beasts, Olivia touched the fresh scar on her wrist, feeling the power pulse. For the first time, she didn't feel unworthy. She felt part of something greater, an alpha and his mate against the dark world. The fight erupted in a maelstrom of fangs and shadows, but in her heart, a flame ignited, of healing, of belonging, of a love that defied death. The mausoleum doors shattered in an explosion of twisted iron and ancient dust, releasing a collective roar that made the torches flicker like candles in the wind. The rival beasts burst into the chamber, a pack of shadowy wolves with bristling fur and blazing red eyes, claws digging into the cracked marble. They were more than animals. Renegade alphas deformed by the broken curse, muscular bodies halfway between human and beast. Fangs bared in slavering mouths. The air filled with a feral stench of sweat, blood, and primal fury, mingling with the altar's sacred incense, creating a sensory cacophony that suffocated Olivia. Draven launched forward like a living shadow, his body contorting in a partial transformation. Muscles swelled under his skin, fangs lengthened into lethal canines, claws sprouted from his fingertips like curved blades. A guttural howl escaped his throat, echoing through the carved walls and making the rivals hesitate for an instant. "This domain is mine," he thundered, his voice distorted by the inner beast, charged with ancestral authority. He collided with the first attacker, claws tearing into the creature's flank in a spray of black blood that splattered the altar. The renegade wolf howled in agony, rolling on the floor in a mass of fur and snapping bones, but the others pressed forward, surrounding him in a threatening semicircle. Olivia recoiled against the cold wall, her heart hammering like a war drum in her chest. The blood pact pulsed in her wrist, a hot burn that spread like living roots through her veins, connecting her to Draven viscerally. She felt each of his blows as if it were her own. The stinging pain when an enemy claw grazed his shoulder, the fire of fury that drove him. The baby stirred violently now, desperate kicks against her belly, as if the little one felt the battle coursing in their mingled blood. "No, please," she whispered, her hands pressed to her womb, tears streaming down her dust-smeared face. Memories of violence assaulted her, her father's heavy, merciless fists marking her skin as if she were broken property. "I'm too weak for this," Dread thought, corroding her newfound determination, but the bond anchored her, an invisible thread that kept her from collapsing. One of the rival wolves, larger than the others, with ancient scars crossing its deformed muzzle, fixed its red eyes on her. It growled, sniffing the air, drawn by the scent of fresh blood from the pact. Hers, pure and human, mingled with that of an alpha guardian. "The human bitch and the whelp," it snarled in a hoarse, almost articulate voice, its fangs snapping. "Her blood will break the curse. Give her up, Draven, or die with your eternal solitude." The renegade alpha leaped over a pile of fallen runes, aiming directly at Olivia, claws extended to rip her swollen flesh. Draven spun in midair, intercepting the attack with an impact that echoed like thunder. Their bodies collided in a tangle of fangs and claws, rolling on the ground in a deadly dance. Blood splattered, staining the walls with symbolic patterns, as if the mausoleum itself drank the violence to revive ancient bargains. He sank his fangs into the rival's shoulder, tearing off a piece of rotting flesh. But the renegade retaliated, its claws opening a deep gash across Draven's chest. The guardian growled in pain. Golden blood, a sign of his immortal lineage, streaming from the moon scar on his arm. "You will not touch her," he roared, pushing the enemy against the altar. The stone cracked under the impact, and a wave of silver energy erupted, repelling the other wolves like a living shield. Olivia watched, paralyzed, but something within her stirred. The pact wasn't just protection, it was shared power, an echo of awakened ancestries. She felt a spark in her blood, hot and wild, as if the baby responded to the moon's call. Her green eyes blazed for an instant, reflecting the moonlight filtered through the cracks in the ceiling, and a vision invaded her again. Not Draven's memories, but her own, distorted by the bond. She saw her mother, who died young in a cursed childbirth, whispering of a human lineage linked to the Alphas, guardians of forgotten treaties, women who carried the gift of uniting human and wolf through blood. "I am not unworthy," Olivia murmured, her voice gaining strength. The trauma of rejection, her father's shouts, the village's stares transformed into fury, a fire that propelled her forward. She moved, picking up a wolf figurine fallen on the floor, heavy like an improvised weapon. One of the smaller rivals, distracted by the fight, lunged toward her, snarling with hunger in its eyes. Olivia raised the object and struck it against the beast's head, the impact echoing with a satisfying crack. The wolf staggered, dazed, and she kicked it away, maternal instinct guiding her like a primal force. "Get away from my son!" she screamed, her voice echoing in the chamber like an unexpected command. The pact responded. A silver aura enveloped her, weakening the renegade, who howled and retreated, burned by the touch of the sacred bond. Draven, noticing her intervention, turned for a second, his golden eyes meeting hers amidst the chaos. Pride and desire shone there, mingled with the pain of battle. "You are stronger than you think," he growled, before plunging back into the fight. Together they pushed the rivals back, he with claws and fangs, she with awakened power, guiding her hand as if the blood united them in a synchronized dance. One by one the wolves fell, dead or fleeing into the forest shadows, leaving trails of blood and howls of defeat echoing in the night. Panting, Draven rose over the final rival alpha, who lay wounded on the ground, his chest heaving. "The treaty persists," he declared, his deep voice cutting through the post-battle silence. "Return to your exile, or the moon will consume you all." The renegade snarled a final curse, but dragged himself out, vanishing into the fog with the survivors. The mausoleum returned to stillness, broken yet victorious, the runes on the altar pulsing faintly, like a calming heart. Olivia collapsed against the wall, her body trembling with exhaustion and adrenaline. Draven approached, still semi-transformed, enemy blood staining his form. He knelt before her, his fangs slowly retracting, his golden eyes softening with a tenderness that disarmed her. "You fought," he murmured, extending his hand to touch her face, wiping away a tear mingled with dust. The touch was electric, sending waves of heat across her skin, awakening a sensual tension that contrasted with the recent horror. Their bodies were close, the scent of him. Earth, blood, and something wildly attractive, enveloping her like a forbidden embrace. "I was afraid of failing, of being the weakness that would kill us," she confessed, her voice hoarse, her fingers entwining with his. The baby calmed, as if sensing the victory, and Olivia allowed herself to lean against his chest, feeling the alpha's accelerated heart beat in unison with hers. "But you showed me that I'm not just a victim. The bond. It makes me feel like I belong." Draven pulled her closer, his lips brushing her forehead in a hesitant kiss, laden with contained desire. "And you free me from loneliness, Olivia. The pact unites us beyond the curse, a love that heals monsters." Their eyes met, and for an instant the dark world of the graveyard dissolved, leaving only the promise of a future between shadows and light. But outside, the fog thickened, carrying distant howls, not of rivals, but of something older, a threat that the desecrated treaty had awakened. The full moon rose, and with it the true test of the bond, a choice between mortality and immortality that could seal their destiny or destroy it forever. The full moon rose in the sky like a merciless sentinel, bathing the graveyard in a silver glow that transformed the headstones into spectral sentinels. The fog gradually dissipated, revealing the scars of battle, pieces of twisted iron on the mausoleum doors, pools of black blood hardening on the cracked marble, and the distant echo of howls, not of defeat, but of a primal call. Olivia still trembled in Draven's arms, her body pressed against his in a mix of exhaustion and longing, the warmth of his skin contrasting with the cold that seeped through the cracks. The blood pact pulsed in her wrist like a second heart, weaving invisible threads between them, not just protection, but a desire that grew like wild ivy, entwining wounded souls. Draven lifted her gently, carrying her to the central altar, where the runes now glowed with renewed intensity, fueled by the mingled blood. He laid her on a soft slab, covered with ancient furs that smelled of forest and forgotten time. His golden eyes devoured her, filled with a hunger that went beyond the battle. "The moon awakens the true guardian of the curse," he murmured, his voice hoarse with fatigue and something deeper, sensual. "The primordial alpha who sealed the treaty. He comes to claim what is his, the blood of the bond we formed. If we don't confront him, he will consume us, me, you, our child." Olivia touched her belly, feeling the baby stir vigorously, as if responding to the lunar call. Fear invaded her again, an echo of the trauma she carried, the feeling of being a burden, of attracting destruction with her mere existence. What if I am the weakness? My human blood, it attracts them like bait. My father always said I was cursed, that my swollen body was proof of impurity. If I accept all this, what happens to the baby? He'll be born into a world of monsters like me. Draven leaned over her, his lips brushing her forehead, slowly descending along the curve of her face until they hovered near hers. The touch was electric, awakening a heat in her womb that mingled maternal and forbidden, a desire that healed invisible scars. "You are not weakness, Olivia. Your blood awakens what is best in me. The alpha who protects does not destroy. The complete ritual demands a choice, mortality, and you live as human. But the bond breaks, leaving us vulnerable, or shared immortality, where our blood merges forever, breaking the curse and giving our child the power of a united lineage." His fingers traced her wrist, rekindling the sting of the cut, and a vision united them. A future where she, strong and accepted, walked beside him in Gothic courts under eternal moons, their baby growing as a bridge between worlds. Before she could answer, the ground trembled violently, as if the earth spewed up buried secrets. From the depths of the mausoleum, a colossal form emerged, not a wolf but an ancestral entity, a primordial alpha with fur as silver as the moon, eyes as black as endless abysses. Its body was a fusion of beast and shadow, claws that raked the air with thunderous cracks, fangs that dripped ethereal essence. "Draven, betrayer of the pact, roared the creature, its voice a chorus of howls echoing in the walls. "You dared to bind yourself to a frail human. The treaty demands purity of wolf blood. Hand over the whelp, and I will spare your solitary eternity." Draven stood, transforming completely now, his body expanding into a mass of muscles and black fur, howling a challenge that made the altar's runes explode with light. He launched against the primordial, claws colliding in an impact that cracked the ceiling, dust and moonlight falling like sacred rain. The battle was titanic, fangs tearing the air, golden and silver blood splattering the walls in symbolic patterns, broken bonds, woven curses. Olivia rose, the pact propelling her, but dread held her. Visions of her father beating her, of the village spitting on her, screamed that she was unworthy of such power. The primordial retaliated, a claw striking Draven in the flank, sending him against the wall with a crash. The guardian alpha fell, gasping, blood streaming in rivulets that weakened the runes. "Olivia, choose now!" he snarled, his golden eyes pleading amidst the pain. The entity turned to her, sniffing the air, drawn by the scent of new life. "Come, human, your blood will strengthen me. Sever the bond and live as the wandering bitch you are." The words cut like blades, reopening ancient wounds. Olivia felt the cry rise, but the baby kicked forcefully, a primal call that echoed in her blood. "I am not wandering," she whispered, her voice gaining volume. "I am the guardian you fear." With a scream of unleashed fury, she ran to the altar, cutting her wrist again with the fallen dagger, blood gushing over the runes. "I choose immortality through the bond, for the family we deserve." The silver light exploded, enveloping her in a subtle transformation, veins glowing like moonlight, strength flowing through her swollen body, trauma dissolving into acceptance. The power connected her to Draven, healing his wounds as she channeled the energy against the primordial. Together they attacked, Draven with fierce claws, she with the bond that burned the entity's shadows like purifying fire. The ancestral alpha howled in agony, its body dissolving into mist and echoes, the curse breaking in a flash that illuminated the mausoleum like a new dawn. The treaty reformed, not into a prison, but an eternal alliance. Humans and alphas united by the blood of Olivia and her child. Exhausted, they collapsed together on the floor. Her body now immortal, yet still vulnerable in pregnancy. Draven embraced her, his lips finding hers in a deep kiss, full of contained passion and relief. "You saved us," he murmured against her mouth, his hands tracing soft curves over her belly. "My love, my alpha. The graveyard is no longer a prison, it's our home." Olivia smiled for the first time in months, her tears now of joy. The baby calmed, and in the stillness she felt the future pulsed. A birth under the moon, a reborn court in Eldoria, where the rejected found belonging. The fog outside dissipated, revealing stars as witnesses, and in the dark heart of the graveyard, love bloomed, transforming monsters into guardians, loneliness into an eternal bond.